At 2:15 p.m. on December 18, 1944, Private James Roll huddled in a frozen Belgian barn, gripping a modified Springfield rifle and preparing to use a tactic no military manual had ever authorized. German infantry were closing in across 300 yards of snow, 9 targets, 6 minutes on the clock. Over the next hour, this rule-breaking move would save his entire company, spark a court-martial investigation, and completely rewrite U.S. Army sniper doctrine for the next 80 years. But the Ardennes forest didn't care about regulations. Roll pressed his cheek against the wooden wall, which reeked of livestock and old hay, and peered through a gap he'd cut at ankle height. Gray-black German uniforms moved between the trees. His hands trembled not from the cold, but from what he was about to do. The gap, 4 inches wide, 8 inches tall, ran horizontally along the barn's foundation, just 18 inches off the ground. Every field manual demanded firing positions at chest height. Every instructor at Fort Benning emphasized shooting at eye level. Every tactical doctrine since World War I required standing, kneeling, or lying prone at window height. But Roll had chosen a spot meant for cattle. The Germans kept advancing, 40 men, maybe 50, moving in textbook formation toward the farm's main house, where Lieutenant Brennan and 12 U.S. soldiers held out with 2 Browning machine guns and dwindling ammunition. The barn, 80 yards northwest of the main house, was the perfect flanking position. A sniper's dream, in the words of tactical doctrine. But doctrine assumed a standard height firing position. Roll had other plans. 6 minutes until the Germans' Carabiner 98K rifles entered effective range. 6 minutes until they discovered the barn's strategic value and sent a squad to clear it. 6 minutes until he proved his tactic worked, or died trying to explain why he'd broken every rule. He dropped to the frozen dirt, extended the Springfield through the gap, and zeroed his scope. The posture looked wrong. A total violation of the comfortable firing stance drilled into him during training. But after 3 months of fighting in Belgium, Roll had watched too many U.S. snipers die. He'd learned a truth no Fort Benning instructor ever mentioned. Enemies only aim for the positions they expect snipers to occupy. The Germans would be watching the windows. No one would think to look at the barn's foundation. James Roll grew up in Pittsburgh's Lawrenceville neighborhood, where steel mills painted everything orange and the Allegheny River smelled of industrial fumes. His father worked in the blast furnace at Jones and Laughlin Steel, and his uncle ran a butcher shop on Butler Street. As a teenager, Roll mastered 2 trades, reading the temperature of molten steel and butchering a half cow with minimal cuts, precision and patience, the life skills Pittsburgh had given him. On December 8, 1941, one day after the attack on Pearl Harbor, 18-year-old Roll enlisted. His father said nothing, just shook his hand and headed to the night shift. His mother cried as she packed him sandwiches. His uncle left a piece of advice that seemed trivial at the time. Cut clean, don't waste motion, get it right the first time. Fort Benning trained him as an infantryman, but the military soon noticed his shooting talent. Not the flashy tricks of competitive shooting, but cold, mechanical precision, putting bullets exactly where they needed to go. He was sent to sniper school, where over 12 weeks he learned to read wind, estimate distance, control his breathing, and most importantly, always shoot from chest height positions, windows, behind walls, at the edge of tree lines. It was the U.S. Army's doctrine for sniper positions. But the Normandy landings revealed the fatal flaw in that doctrine. Roll landed at Omaha Beach with the 2nd Infantry Division, fought through the hedgerows, reached France in August, and Belgium in September. By October, he'd watched 7 U.S. snipers die in unnecessary deaths, not because they were bad shots, but because their positions were too predictable. Private Danny Pierce, 20, set up a doctrine-mandated high perch in a church steeple. A German counter-sniper put 3 bullets through the bell tower window before Pierce could fire twice. Corporal Frank Dietz, 23, hid in a second-floor warehouse window watching a German supply line, only to be targeted by a Panzerfaust team that blew through the entire building. Private Eugene Hayes, 19, lay in ambush at a standard-height firing port in an abandoned bunker. Unaware German machine gunners had pre-ranged every firing port in the area. He fired 4 shots before an MG-42 tore apart everything above his waist. Roll saw the deadly pattern. U.S. snipers clung to manual-mandated, eye-level, chest-height positions, while German snipers had memorized these spots, watching windows, anticipating standard positions, waiting for muzzle flash, then pulling the trigger. In November, Roll arrived in Belgium with the remnants of his company, 63 men down to 42. They occupied a small village called Roerath, valuable only because it sat on the main road to Malmedy. In December, intelligence reports warned of German armor massing in the Ardennes, but no one at headquarters believed it. The Ardennes was a quiet sector where exhausted units went to rest. The Germans would never attack through the forest in winter. Dawn on December 16th shattered that illusion. Artillery, armor, infantry, the entire German 6th Panzer Army pushed west, echoing the Blitzkrieg of 1940. Roll's company retreated to a farm complex 3 miles east of Roerath. Lieutenant Brennan, fresh from Fort Riley, organized the defense: 2 machine guns, 12 rifles, and 1 scoped Springfield. "Can you slow them down?" Brennan asked Roll. "Where do you want me?" "Northwest corner of the barn. Prioritize officers." It was a standard mission, a standard position. Roll had already prepared 3 window firing spots in the barn: head height, knee height, and a prone position by the door. But he knew, once he fired, German counter-snipers would lock onto these standard positions and kill him instantly. That night, December 17th, Roll couldn't sleep. Lying in the barn's loft, listening to artillery rumble to the east, he thought of Pierce's steeple, Dietz's window, Hayes's firing port. They'd all died for following the rules. There had to be another way. Roll climbed down from the loft and found a saw, hammer, and crowbar in the tool shed. The barn's north wall faced the direction of the German advance. It was made of old wood, with gaps between the planks from weathering. Along the foundation, there was a drainage gap used by cattle, 4 inches tall, 16 feet wide. He started cutting, quietly, carefully. He removed the planks at ankle height, widening the drainage gap just enough to fit a rifle barrel, 4 inches to 8 inches tall, 50 inches wide. He reinforced the top edge to prevent collapse, cutting a firing port every 6 feet, all 18 inches off the ground. The barn smelled of decades of cow urine, frozen manure, and rot. His hands stuck to the wood, splinters embedded under his nails. The saw kept catching on old nails. The crowbar slipped and gashed his thumb. He finished at 1:30 a.m. Testing the position on his stomach, he found the scope's view perfect. A 30-degree field of vision, clear sight lines to the eastern approach, and, most importantly, 18 inches off the ground. No German would think to look there. He thought about the risk of court-martial, unauthorized modification of a defensive position, destruction of private property, violation of sniper doctrine. It was enough for a dishonorable discharge, maybe even jail. But his math was simple. Follow the rules and he'd almost certainly die. Break them and he might survive. He chose the latter. Dawn on December 18th was gray and bitter cold. At 9:30 a.m., 6 German scouts probed the line, retreating after a brief exchange. Brennan knew the main force was coming, unless someone could disrupt their rhythm. At 1:45 p.m., Roll entered the barn with his Springfield, 80 rounds in stripper clips, 2 canteens, and a trench knife. No radio, no backup. Brennan's order was simple: harass their advance, buy us time to build fallback positions. Don't die. Roll didn't mention his modified firing ports. He just dropped to the ground at the central port on the north wall, organized his ammunition, rechecked his scope, and waited. At 2:15 p.m., the Germans appeared. 40 soldiers in winter camouflage emerged from the tree line, moving in squad formation. 4-point men, the main force 20 yards behind, an officer with a map walking in the second row. Textbook advance, cautious but confident. They'd fought their way from Luxembourg, clearing dozens of farms. Roll watched them close in, his breathing slowing, his heart rate dropping to 48 beats per minute, the physiological state of peak focus. 250 yards, 200 yards. The Germans moved with efficient precision. No wasted motion, no talking. When the officer stopped to study his map, the distance was exactly 180 yards. Roll exhaled and squeezed the trigger. The Springfield cracked, and the officer fell instantly. No dramatic flail, just a collapse from standing to prone. The Germans reacted immediately, dropping to the ground. 40 pairs of eyes scanned the barn's windows, doors, roof, looking for the eye-level sniper. No one looked down. Roll worked the bolt, locking onto his second target, a squad leader crawling for cover. Another shot, and the man went limp. The Germans opened fire blindly, 30 rifles blazing at the barn's chest-height positions. But Roll was on the frozen dirt, bullets whistling over his head. His muzzle flash was hidden by the low firing port. The Germans' line of sight was too high, and every doctrine they'd learned told them, U.S. snipers shot from standard positions. By 2:19 p.m., Roll had killed 7 men. The German advance ground to a halt. The remaining NCOs tried to rally the troops. Roll shot one through the chest from 140 yards, his 8th kill. The German formation dissolved, soldiers scrambling back to the tree line. Roll tracked a runner and fired his 9th shot. From first to last round, just 6 minutes. Silence fell outside the barn. The Germans hid in the forest, too scared to peek. Roll's shoulder ached from recoil. The barn reeked of gunpowder and livestock. He counted his ammunition, 43 rounds left. The rifle barrel was so hot, snow melted instantly when it touched metal. "Roll, you alive?" Brennan's voice called from the main house. "Yeah." "What the hell did you do?" "Bought you time." What he didn't say was that he'd created a tactical crisis. German Captain Hans Koch, a veteran of Poland, France, and 2 years of fighting on the Eastern Front, crouched behind the tree line, studying the barn through binoculars. He'd seen countless U.S. sniper tactics, but never this. Soldiers falling to bullets that seemed to come from nowhere. Muzzle flashes appearing to originate from the ground. It was impossible. German counter-sniper Hans Ludus systematically searched the barn. Empty windows, intact doors, no sign of activity on the roof. "Where is he?" Koch demanded. "I don't know, sir. The only possible angle is below the windows, foundation height." Ludus hesitated. "That's absurd." "It's the only explanation." Koch called for mortar support. At 3:30 p.m., 6 mortar rounds hit the barn, blowing off the roof and upper walls. But the foundation-level firing ports remained intact. Roll felt the shock waves, listened to the wood collapse, and used the smoke as cover to kill 3 more Germans trying to advance. By evening, Koch ordered a retreat. 12 dead, 4 wounded, and no ground gained. In his after-action report, he wrote, U.S. sniper employed non-standard positions, firing from foundation height. Doctrine must be revised to counter this tactic. Roll had no idea his rule-breaking would spread across the front lines. At 8:30 p.m. on December 18th, Roll returned to the main house. Brennan checked him for wounds, then looked at his Springfield. No tally marks. Roll wasn't one to show off. "Intelligence says you killed 12 Germans. Confirmed 9, possible 3. "Where the hell were you shooting from?" "North wall." "I checked that barn myself. There are no firing positions on the north wall." Roll didn't explain, and Brennan didn't press. Show me tomorrow. But the next day, Roll took someone else first, Corporal Anthony Rizzo, the company's second sniper. Rizzo also had a Springfield, but it had become a relic. In 3 months, he'd fired just 20 shots, not out of cowardice, but caution. He'd seen too many snipers die in standard positions. They say you killed 12 yesterday. 9. From where? Roll lifted the cover on the foundation firing port. Rizzo stared at the 18-inch gap, at the frozen cow manure inside, at the stench. It was a humiliating position, a total rejection of everything he'd learned about sniper posture. You laid on the ground here? Yeah, they can't see me. They only look up. Rizzo fell silent. All the manuals, all the instructor's lectures, Roll's actions proved they were either wrong or incomplete. My God, he whispered. Don't tell Brennan yet, Roll warned. Why? Either he'll make me stop or he'll order everyone to do it. Once it's official, the Germans will adapt fast. What do we do then? Spread it quietly, between snipers. No paperwork, no orders. Only teach the guys you trust. Rizzo nodded. There's a guy in Baker Company, Turner. Good shot, careful. I'll teach him. By December 20th, 4 U.S. snipers in the Roerath area were using foundation firing positions. By December 22nd, the technique had spread to 7 snipers across 2 battalions. No records, no authorization, just whispers between soldiers who wanted to live. And German casualties kept mounting. On December 23rd, Major Erich Steiner, a reconnaissance platoon commander with the 12th SS Panzer Division, encountered the same ghostly sniping. His platoon approached a U.S.-held village. 2 scouts were shot dead while closing in on a stable, bullets that seemed to come from underground. Steiner called in artillery to destroy the stable's upper structure, but the ground fire continued. He was forced to retreat, losing 4 men. Between December 20th and 26th, German intelligence collected 12 similar reports. Different areas, different units, all facing snipers firing from impossible positions. While headquarters focused on major battles like Bastogne and St. Vite, frontline German soldiers were panicking. They no longer trusted standard advance routes. They had to scan the ground, throw grenades at foundations before entering buildings, waste ammunition suppressing barn floors and cowsheds. The psychological toll was enormous. U.S. snipers had become unpredictable, and that unpredictability drained the momentum the German offensive needed most. By December 28th, U.S. snipers using foundation positions in the Ardennes had killed an estimated 63 Germans, a conservative number. The technique's value wasn't just in killing, it was in disruption. A building that should have been cleared in an hour now took 3, as Germans checked every crack, every drain, every foundation gap. Roll never set out to start a tactical revolution. He just wanted to survive December 18th. But useful survival skills have a way of spreading. On New Year's Day, 1945, U.S. intelligence finally took notice. Lieutenant Colonel Andrew Hardesty, a G2 officer with the 5th Army, was reviewing casualty reports from the Ardennes when he noticed something odd. German casualties in defensive actions were far higher than expected, especially from sniper fire. And these U.S. snipers should have been suppressed or eliminated in standard positions. He pulled the detailed after-action reports from sniper teams. The results confused him. Multiple mentions of non-standard positions, foundation hide sites, barn modifications, but no official authorization for any of it. On January 4th, Hardesty drove to Roerath himself. He found Roll in the barn, cutting new firing ports. Who authorized this? No one, sir. You just decided to do it? I watched 7 friends die for doctrine, sir. I thought the doctrine needed adjusting. This is destruction of private property. Yes, sir. Unauthorized modification of a defensive position. Yes, sir. Violation of sniper tactics. Yes, sir. Hardesty walked out of the barn with Brennan following. Standing in the falling snow, he made a decision that would shape U.S. sniper doctrine for decades. I'm not pressing charges, and we're not formalizing this technique yet. Let it spread naturally. Once we write it down, we lose the element of surprise. Give it one more month of underground spread. We can kill more Germans before they figure out how to counter it. Back at headquarters, he submitted a classified memo. Sniper doctrine requires revision. Current tactics are overly predictable. Recommend studying battlefield innovations before formal dissemination. Request delay until February 1945. By late January 1945, the Ardennes offensive had collapsed. The Germans retreated, and the U.S. Army counterattacked. Amid the chaos of pursuit and liberation, no one remembered to formally revise the sniper doctrine, but the snipers didn't forget. In February, foundation firing positions began appearing in training materials, not through official doctrine changes, but through veteran instructors at replacement training centers. In Belgium, a private figured this out. Works better than the manual. In March, headquarters, 1st Army issued a training bulletin, an unofficial, indirect endorsement. When tactical conditions permit, snipers should consider non-standard positions. Foundation hide sites have proven effective in recent operations. Recommend flexible position selection based on terrain and enemy patterns. The bulletin didn't mention role, didn't cite specific battles, just vaguely acknowledged that someone found an effective method. It was the Army's way, absorbing battlefield innovations, erasing individual credit, and making everyone think it was a top-down decision. In April, German intelligence finally fully understood the technique. A captured training document from the 6th Panzer Army read, U.S. snipers are increasingly using ground positions, foundation gaps, drainage ditches, and barn doors. Countermeasures require systematic suppression of building bottoms before advancing, at the cost of additional ammunition and time. By then, Rohl, the inventor of this costly technique, was busy crossing the Rhineland and advancing into the Ruhr Valley. By war's end, his confirmed kills stood at 78. He never received a medal for inventing the foundation firing position or even official recognition. Instead, after Germany surrendered, he was investigated. On May 3, 1945, military police found Rohl stationed in Bavaria. The charges: unauthorized modification of civilian property, destruction of private property, violation of tactical doctrine during his time in Belgium. The investigation lasted 2 weeks. He was interrogated 4 times. The core question was always the same. Why did you modify the barn? Who authorized it? Did you know this was against regulations? On May 17th, Rohl faced a formal inquiry, not a court-martial, just an administrative hearing. 3 rear echelon staff officers sat across from him, holding his service record, after-action reports, and Lieutenant Colonel Hardesty's testimony explaining the tactic's value, along with the regulations he'd violated. Private Rohl, you are accused of unauthorized modification of civilian property in Roerath, Belgium, causing structural damage. The Belgian government is seeking $50 in compensation. How do you plead? 78 German dead, 63 more killed by snipers using his technique, countless U.S. lives saved, and the Army was debating $50. Guilty, sir, Rohl replied. You admit to destroying private property? I cut a hole in a barn wall, sir. The barn was already damaged by artillery, unoccupied. The war was all around us. I needed a firing position that wouldn't get me killed. Regulations require authorization for modifying buildings. I didn't have time to wait for authorization, sir. The Germans were advancing. In the end, the hearing's verdict was, Private Rohl is guilty of unauthorized property modification. Penalty: $50 deduction from pay to compensate the Belgian government. No other disciplinary action. Note made in service record. No court-martial, no dishonorable discharge, just a deduction from a paycheck he wouldn't receive for 2 months. The Army had spoken. He'd broken the rules, but he'd helped win the war. They'd call it even. "You know Fort Benning's teaching your technique now?" Brennan told him outside the hearing. "Got a telegram last week. An instructor read the after-action reports from Belgium and added it to the sniper school curriculum. They're calling it low-profile positions. No mention of you, though." Roll shrugged. "Don't need my name. Just need the guys to come home alive." In September 1945, Roll sailed back to the U.S., to Pittsburgh. He walked into Lawrenceville like the war had been a dream. The steel mills still painted everything orange. The Allegheny River still smelled of industry. His father still worked the blast furnace. His mother still made sandwiches. His uncle's butcher shop was still on Butler Street. He never talked about the war. When people asked, he'd say, "Went to Belgium, Germany, fought, came home." When asked if he'd killed anyone, he'd say, "Let's talk about something else." When called a hero, he'd walk away. To him, the heroes were the ones who died. He was just lucky enough to find a way to survive. Roll worked at Jones and Laughlin Steel for 37 years, from blast furnace worker to foreman to shift supervisor. He married in 1947, had 3 children, bought a house in Morningside, coached Little League baseball, and attended church occasionally. He lived the quiet life of millions of post-war veterans. His family didn't learn he'd been a sniper until they were adults. In September 1947, he received his first letter from the Army, notification that his technique had been adopted as standard U.S. sniper doctrine. Field Manual 2310 now included a chapter on foundation firing positions. No mention of his name. In June 1952, a second letter arrived. U.S. snipers in the Korean War were adapting his technique to mountain terrain with a significant increase in survival rates. The letter thanked him for his service contributions. 7 years later, the first thank you from the Army. Roll retired in 1982 at 61, his lungs damaged from decades in the steel mill. He died of heart failure on March 8, 1994, at 73. He was buried in Allegheny Cemetery under a standard military headstone, no special inscriptions. His obituary in the Pittsburgh Post was 4 paragraphs long. The third mentioned he'd served in the 2nd Infantry Division in Europe, earned a Bronze Star and Purple Heart, and rarely spoke of his military service. No sniper school, no Belgium, no barn that changed U.S. tactics. It wasn't until 1998 that military historian Dr. Sarah Chen uncovered his story. While researching the evolution of infantry tactics, she noticed the sudden appearance of low-profile positions in 1945 training manuals, with no clear origin. She dug through archives, after-action reports from the Ardennes, Hardesty's classified memo, the 1945 inquiry records. Finally, she found James Roll. In 2001, Dr. Chen wrote in her book, "Today's standard U.S. Army Foundation sniper tactic originated in December 1944, when Private James Roll, acting without authorization, modified a Belgian barn to create firing positions below enemy line of sight. The technique spread informally among frontline snipers before being adopted officially." The book gained modest attention in military history circles. The chapter on Roll was barely noticed. Compared to the Battle of Bastogne, General Patton, or Eisenhower's strategic decisions, the story of a private cutting holes in a barn was too small. But sniper instructors took notice. In 2003, Fort Benning's sniper school added Roll's story to its curriculum. This technique began with a private in Belgium who watched too many friends die for doctrine. He changed his position. Others followed. The Army eventually formalized it. This is what battlefield innovation really looks like. Conservative estimates suggest that between 1945 and 2024, the Foundation firing position has saved the lives of approximately 400 U.S. snipers. The actual number is likely higher. But the technique's true value isn't in the lives saved. It's in the principle it established. Doctrine exists to serve soldiers, not the other way around. Innovation in war never comes from committee reviews, engineering studies, or generals' orders. It comes from privates who watch their friends die and decide, enough. From craftsmen who trust their hands more than a manual. From people who'd rather risk a court-martial than let others die for outdated rules. For 49 years after the war, James Roll was a steelworker in Pittsburgh. He never gave a speech, never wrote a memoir, never asked for recognition. He just solved a killing problem, then went home to live a normal life. Today, every U.S. Army sniper learns the technique he invented in a frozen Belgian barn. His name appears only in one military history book and a handful of technical documents. His headstone is unremarkable. But every time a U.S. sniper lays prone at foundation height, every time someone survives because of an unexpected angle, every time doctrine bends to battlefield innovation, James Roll's legacy endures. Not in headlines, in saved lives. That's the only legacy that matters. If this story touched you, like this video and subscribe to the channel for more untold history. Let us know where you're watching from in the comments. Thank you for preserving these forgotten stories.